Everybody, Sprocket here, and it's time for our next adventure. So this is my dad's 99 Ford Ranger, 4-wheel drive. It's got the 3.0 V6 5-speed stick. The stick is the reason that it's in the garage. Clutch is almost done. It still moves, but just not very well. So we got to do a clutch in this thing. So, a few things before we get started. Something to consider anytime you're doing a clutch or anything drivetrain related. 1, make sure you got wheel chocks. Beep. Because you're going to have to pull drive shafts. Now, this being a 4-wheel drive, we got to pull both. We got the rear and there's going to be one up front. Got to pull both those out. Now, I'm going to drain the fluids out of both the transmission and the transfer case. So that way, 1, they're lighter. But then 2, they're not making a mess when I remove them. Good rule of thumb. While we have this apart, we're doing the transmission mount as well. I'm going to do the seals on the transfer case, both sides, and then the input shaft on the transmission. And we're also going to do the rear main seal gasket on the engine and the old pan gasket, because we're going to have all that stuff loose. So it's perfect time to do that. And this thing's got over 100,000 miles on it. So I'm pretty sure they're still factory original. So we want to get that done. The other thing we're going to do is engine mounts. Now, along with making sure you chock the wheels so that the vehicle doesn't move on you, you also, on this, I believe, I'm going to find out for sure here in a minute, the starter is attached to the transmission bell housing and not the engine. So in order to drop the transmission, you got to pull the starter. So that being the case, there's a hot lead on the starter. I don't want arcing out, so we're going to disconnect the battery. So battery's going to get disconnected, drop the starter off of it. I'll have to figure out if I'm going to actually disconnect the wiring and just pull the whole thing out of the way, or if I'm just going to let it hang by the wires. I don't like that idea much because there is some rust under here. So now something else, in order to drop this transmission, now you could probably do it without it, but I'm not going to take the time to try and figure out how to do it. So we're going to be pulling the exhaust Y pipe out of place because it'll unbolt from both exhaust manifolds, and then there's a third spot where you can just literally drop the whole thing out of the way, and then the rest of the exhaust will be hung up, and then of course your manifolds are out of the way, and then that Y pipe's out of the way. Everything's out of the way. So you always want to make sure, again, chock the wheels, disconnect power if you got to deal with anything power related, drain fluids. Then the other thing is, before you pull anything out, make sure that everything that's connected to it from the body is disconnected. The wiring, anything to do with the speedometer, all that stuff. Oh, and the shifter. Because it's going to be very difficult to drop this out with the shifter attached, so we'll have to pull the shifter too. So, without further ado, let's get started. Alright, so I know it's hard to see. Top post battery, you can see these are aftermarket because one's red, one's black. So what we're going to do, when you go to disconnect these, loosen up the nut, of course, obviously. But you see how this is pinched together? What we're going to do is take a flathead to this, pry it apart a little bit, so that way it releases from the post better. I just got to find a flathead. Let's see. Ooh, that's ugly, but it'll do the job. So, get your flathead down in between here, long side. There we go. Oops, sorry about the shadows. Give it just a little twist. You see it comes loose. Pop it off. Make sure it's out of the way and doesn't come back up and hit. Now, I'm doing both. I know this one's kind of hard to see, but because for some reason the light on my phone decided not to come back on. Same thing. Give this a little twist. Now these are, well, they used to be made out of lead. Now it's some other mix. See, once you get it spinning, you know it's loose. Pop it off. Get it down out of the way. Boom. No more power to the vehicle. Now we're set to do other things. Now, as you can see, got the wheels chocked on both sides. Now, part of the reason I'm going to do that is, before I get too far into this, we need to loosen up the bolts on the drive shafts. So, get up under here. with your 12 point, put it in gear. Now, obviously, these have been on here for a while. Ooh, and they're not going to want to let loose. So I'm going to get these sprayed down with some PB Blast from the threads, make sure that they get loose. May have to get a hammer after that. But, as you can see, it's not moving because I put it in gear. Once you get these broken loose, then you can take it back out of gear and pull the shifter. And this drive shaft bolts on both sides. So you want to get both of those pulled out because, like I said, we're going to have to drop the transfer case. As you can see, all the lovely rust. And then up front, we got the same thing to do, but that one's going to be, has a joint like this, but then the back side of it's a CV joint, which I'll show you here in a little bit. All right, so sorry about the road noise in the back. Got the drive shafts out. Let me tell you what a bugger that was. Holy cow. I was using a pipe for extra leverage, and even that in some cases wasn't working. So we ended up using a jack, floor jack. Just don't ask me how, but it worked. Never do that by yourself though. Make sure you got somebody with you. So you can see it's shiny right now. My dad is applying some special sauce to help with the rust. There's the front one. You can see he's applying. So this one's got a CV joint on the back side where it attaches to the transfer case. There's 6 bolts holding that in with a couple of little plates. Excuse me. Those bolts are kind of tiny. They're 8mm head and maybe 10mm threads, so they're not very big. But it's a good thing we're deciding to do this, and of course to replace the U-joints, because they're not terrible yet, but they're not real good either. They're still, I would imagine, and I'm pretty sure they're still factory. So they're, let's see, this is a 99, so 09, 19, 21 years old, 22. So anyhow, next we're going to try and get the Y-pipe out of the way, which I'm pretty sure I'm going to break bolts, but we'll see in a bit. All right, new day. All got work done. See the Y-pipe, it's out. Oh man. I was able to get the bolts out of the manifolds without breaking them, thank God. They fought me. Holy crap, did they fight me. Both O2 sensors I removed out of there, we're going to be replacing those too. I forgot to mention that in our list of things to replace. Right now, oh, also, both drive shafts are out. I think I showed you that earlier. You can see there's the front one missing. So, transfer case. I just got done draining transmission fluid. You see the drain plug right there in the middle of the screen? Hang on. That thing. That one actually, it was a blessing that it didn't fight me. All I had to do was just loosen it up. It was so nice after dealing with all these rusty bolts. So, trying to figure out where the drain plug was for the transfer case, this thing right in front of me. And here, it's behind this, which, nearest I can figure out, this is literally just a bolt-on weight. I don't see any other reason for it, and I have no idea why in the world we need a weight on the back of the transfer case. But the drain plug to drain the transfer case is behind this, so I got to pull this off. You got 1, 2 here and 2 on the other side. Ratchet's on one of them. Maybe it's 3. I don't know. No, there's a 4th one. It's behind the wire there. Yep, there it is. But, yeah, and those are Allen 6-point, so that's going to be interesting, because I'm about to see if I'll have that Allen head to be able to drain it. Well, anyhow, show you more in a bit. Okay, I was wrong. It's not an Allen. 3/8 square. That'll be interesting. Either way, that's our drain plug. Oh, and this particular transfer case takes automatic transmission fluid. Transmission's something different. I ain't sure what that is yet, but I know it's not automatic transmission fluid because the color that came out was not red. Well, it's a week later. As you can see, transmission's not in it anymore. So, time to get the clutch pressure plate, that thing right there, clutch friction, which is behind it, and then pull the flywheel too, because the kit comes with a new one. I have to check the condition of the pilot bearing. It does come with a new one, but if this one's in good shape, I'm not messing with it. I'm just going to re-grease it and leave it. So I'll show you more in a little bit. Alright, so obviously got the flywheel off, clutch is all out of the way. Now you can see how this is all wet here. I went ahead and picked up a oil pan gasket for this thing and a rear main seal, thinking we're in here, we've got it apart, it's the best time to do it. It's a good thing I got the oil pan gasket because you can see right here, maybe, this is the gasket. You see the fluid squishing in there? So that's obviously been leaking, plus you can see it coming down here. So down around the sides over here, you can see it's been leaking. So I didn't even look at this before I picked up those gaskets. I just figured it would be a good idea while we got this thing apart to do the gaskets. So, yeah, somebody upstairs was looking out for us. So, got the oil pan out. Now you can see how this is wet. This is going to be wet because this is where I was handling everything. But all this being wet, this whole thing was leaking. So I ended up having to pull the oil pump with it, which really sucked. I mean, it was only one bolt. That's not the problem. Oil pump drive shaft, that's where it was a problem. Now, I'm hoping... Oh, good, it's a snap ring. I don't know if you can see that, if it'll focus on it. Little snap ring in there. That was a little tricky getting it out of the pump. So once I got this out of the way, there's plenty of clearance underneath the truck above the axle to be able to pull this out of there. So that part's not a problem. It's just, you got to pull the oil pump because it won't come out with that in place. That sucks. I don't know how well you can see down inside that sump there, but there's a lot of crud in there. Let's see if we can stir it up. See it? Yummy. So, I was already going to clean this out before I put it back, but now I really got to make sure I clean it out. Good rule of thumb. Pull any kind of pan of any kind, transmission, oil, valve covers, always clean the inside of them at least. Outside, nah, don't worry about that. Unless you want to see if there's leaks again. Then it's a good idea to clean the outside too, but the inside, most important. Alright, so, probably not the best way to do this, but it's the way I did it. For the rear main seal, I went ahead and popped this rear cap. And I did that for two reasons. One, because it made it a lot easier to get the seal on and off, because this is the new one. The other reason, so I can check the condition of the bearings and the crankshaft, at least on this rear one. You can see here, ooh, maybe, see all the lines in it? Yeah, it's been some junk running through this engine. No copper, that's definitely a plus, but there's definitely been some foreign debris running through it. And up in here, I don't know if you can hear that or not, but I can feel it. Not exactly a good thing for what we use the truck for to be alright, but probably shouldn't beat on it too much. But anyhow, when you're putting this seal in, you want to make sure you got it straight, not cocked this way or this way, or this way or this way. So I'm picking a good reference point. There is a chamfer right here. It goes all the way around. And I'm making sure that I've got it even both sides and up in the top here, so that chamfer is equally showing all the way around before I go to put the cap back on. Now, of course, I'll have to re-torque his cap. I don't know exactly what that torque spec is yet, but I'll figure it out before I get too far. Something else I know I've mentioned in the past when I was working on that 350, same thing applies here. Your little gap right here, there's a machined cutout for this cap to sit into. You don't want to just use the bolts and tighten it into that. You want to get them run down close to it, hold it in place, and then just tap it, because that's supposed to be a machine fit. Not a press fit, but it should be a nice snug fit, and then tighten the bolts down. Just want to make sure I reiterate that. Alright, so, working on the engine mounts. Oil pan's done. Woo, it's really close. Let me tell you what a hassle that was. You can see the new gasket sticking out, rear main seal's done. I really hate engineers. You see how I have to get at that mount nut? This is ridiculous. I don't know who thought that was a good idea. Somebody didn't have to put it into practice. Alright, so working on the engine mounts. Got that one done. Now, as you can see, that's a front axle mount. I had to pull the bolt. It's got these nuts on the back side that basically, once you get them started, they lock themselves into place so they don't spin when you go to turn it. You got this one, that one of course I already showed you, and then that one way up in there. Now, the reason we have to drop this axle down is because up inside of here, you can barely see the tip of it, right there at my fingertip. Oh, there it is the bottom nut for the engine mount. With that axle up in place, you have no access to it whatsoever. So anybody does four-wheel drive engine mounts on one of these Rangers, you're going to have to drop the front axle. Alright, I know it's kind of hard to see, but pilot bearing in there. I cleaned it out for the most part. I'm trying to get better. Hey, there, that might be good. But the roller bearings are in pretty good shape, so I'm just going to re-grease them and reuse them. Mainly because, I don't know if you can see it. Let me see if I can get close enough here. Yeah, focus you. Yeah, it doesn't want to focus. Hey, there it goes. USA. I would rather use a USA-made bearing than a Chinese one. So, there you go. So, you don't have to do this, but I am, because I noticed that the oil came out of this thing was pretty crusty, and the inside of the oil pan was pretty nasty too. So I'm putting the recommended amount of this inside of the crankcase for in-between changes, which back here, add to gas or fuel, add to crankcase. As you can see, 1 ounce for each quart of oil. So this takes 4.5 quarts, so put 4.5 ounces in it. Now, I was going to say earlier, you put everything back together, I dropped the oil pan on this thing. So one thing you want to make sure you do, don't forget to do, is put oil back in it before you start it. That's what I'm working on right now, as you can see, the funnel. Alright, piece of advice. When you go to refill the oil, don't put all of your oil in before. Check to see if the plug is tight and leaking or not leaking. I got about a quart in it, as you can see, maybe. Nothing's leaking, so we're good there. So always want to make sure, check for leaks, and of course, check to see if you actually put the plug back in. So, good rule of thumb. Alright, something to take note of. Anytime you buy new parts, whether it's from the parts store or whether it's online, before you completely unpackage them, like this is still in the plastic packaging, it still has all of the rust preventative on it, the oil. So you want to make comparisons, check your bolts, make sure that they're the same spacing, the pattern's the same, check your diameter, make sure all of that's good, check where these bolts go, which are the ones that hold the pressure plate on for the clutch. Make sure all of it matches up before you unpackage it, because most times once you unpackage it, parts stores I know in particular, they don't want to take it back if you've got it all fingered up with dirt. So be sure you do that before you get it dirty. So parts like this, just like brake rotors, they usually come with some kind of rust preventative oil of some kind on them. So what you want to do, take some brake parts cleaner, carb cleaner, alcohol, something like that. You want to clean them off before you install them. That way everything has a chance to do what it's supposed to do when you try to use it. Something else about these bolts for your flywheel. They have a specific orientation, so you pay attention to how you put it in there, because it only goes one way, at least on this one. So if you can't get all of these bolts to thread in by finger easily, that means you probably don't have it right. Plus, an easy way to tell with this one I found out is one of the bolt holes, if you don't have it right in the right orientation to the crank, is half off. so you only see half of the hole. Just something else to pay attention to. Now, I just put these in temporarily to make sure I had it in the right place, but I got to pull them back off and clean them and put some Loctite on them. Don't want to go too hard at it. I'm just going to use some medium strength, but you want to make sure you do that because you don't want to have to come back in here because it's a pain in the butt to pull all this stuff, which I'm sure you've noticed from my prior, earlier in the video. So, got the flywheel in place. Looks good, right? Except don't do like I do and forget to put the plate behind it before you mount it. Learn from my mistake. So, flywheel's torqued in. Now, the way I did it, it's probably not exactly a recommended way to do it, but the flywheel turning tool I have would not cooperate to hold the flywheel because the flywheel's too small. So what I did, I used my handy dandy Wonder Bar here and locked it into the teeth. Whoops, I got stuff in the way. And up against that dowel, like that. It's really hard to hold that in place, but it did the job. So now, as you can see, got the friction plate in there. I'm fixing to put the pressure plate on. Now this has play in it, so you want to try and hold that kind of sort of centered up against when you go to put the pressure plate and torque it in. So just something to keep in mind. You don't want to leave this sag and then tighten your bolts up on the pressure plate because then it's going to be off center. It'll make things more difficult later. Alright, so progress has been made. There's the old throwout bearing slash slave cylinder. And, bear with me here. We have a transmission in the vehicle. Front bolts are all torqued in. Got the slave cylinder line hooked up. It's just a quick disconnect, so no biggie there. I gotta bleed that yet, and I gotta fill the transmission. I want to get the transmission up into place before I do that, so that way it's kind of level. So now this one just gets transmission fluid, so right over there. Alright, so transfer case in place, except for, where are we at here? Right there. There's a bolt, goes right here. Can you see the conflict? Where did I put the bolt? There it is. This, yeah, it's not going to go in there. What am I going to do? Yeah, I have to remove this to put this in. Again, thank you, Ford. All right, got the shifter back in. I don't know if you can hear it, but of course reverse is going to give me grief, but it's all back in there. It's all tightened in, so one step closer. All right, there's a clutch master cylinder. Kind of hard to find, especially if you don't know where to look for it. But stuff that was in there was pretty nasty and black, so even after we got pressure down at the slave cylinder, I kept bleeding it so that way we could get most of the dirt and crap out of this, because it's likely it's never been changed. So since 99, or probably 98 when it was built. So that's all done. Clutch works good. Well, I can watch it move back and forth, so I know that the throwout bearing and the slave cylinder, all that's working good. I got fluid in the transmission transfer case. I think I mentioned that already, but even if I didn't, there it is. Now, we got to wait till we get the truck back down on the level, because it's still on jack stands up front, to double check the levels in both the transfer case and transmission to make sure that they are topped off. But other than that, I got to put the starter back in, a few other things, and then I got U-joints to do, and pretty much the drivetrain on this should be good to go. Alright, so starter's back in, got it wired up, and remembered to put the shim in there.
What time?
Cleaned up my mess. It is 2:15.
Quarter after. Okay.
Yep. So that's all buttoned up. Pretty much time to work on U-joints for the drive shafts. Fun! So as you can see, front drive shaft is in, and new U-joint. Made sure I got a greasable one so that way it's serviceable. But all that's put together and put back in. Sorry about the closeness, kind of close quarters down here. Here's your CV joint part of it. Got 6 bolts with 6 little plates holding it in. They're 8mm, so you can't exactly torque the crap out of them, and these being Torx, same thing. Gotta be tight, but there's a limit. Alright, so rear drive shafts in, new U-joints. Sorry I didn't film none of it, but they're a pain when they're rusted in. Especially when those little clips that hold them in want to break. So I was going to film me struggling with them because I needed both hands. And it's not like I had somebody that could do filming for me. But everything is torqued in, Loctited as far as these go. So the only thing really left under here is I got to put that dumb weight back on there, but I want to wait till I finish filling that. And the exhaust, and then everything down here is done except for the front suspension, but that's going to be for another adventure. Alright, so finally got my thread chasing tool so we can chase these threads and not tear up the new oxygen sensors. So I'm going to get that done, then I'll be able to put this Y pipe into place. And there's one more O2 sensor, I still have to pull it. It's, I'm not sure where it is. It might be up in front. Either way, I got to pull that, and that one has a rotted off flange. Got my repair flange for it. So we'll finally be able to put the exhaust back on this thing. Anytime you're chasing or tapping threads, you want to make sure you lubricate your tool and what you're chasing. Sorry about the background noise. So, as you can see, shiny, it's already lubricated. So, just a tip, make sure it's lubricated. That keeps it from jamming up and hopefully from doing any damage to the tool or to what you're trying to tap or chase. Alright, as you can hear, got it running. Got the new exhaust in, and as you can see, it's a little cold. But I don't know if you'll be able to see this. Right there. So we got a fancy exhaust system for it as far as from the catalytic converter back. Only one complaint. I had to take 6 inches out of the intermediate pipe to make it work. Don't know why. That's just the way it was set up. But this was a mandrel bent tailpipe, and it's a Dynamax muffler, stainless steel, and it was less than $200. So I'm not going to complain too much. I think it sounds pretty good. And no exhaust leaks. All the O2 sensors are replaced. No engine light. Seems to be running pretty good. So underneath here you can see, and here it's still running. There's the new cat, intermediate pipe. Oh, wait, that's still a cat. Here's the intermediate pipe. And there's my weld where I had to take 6 inches out of it. Shiny. But yep, got that all replaced. So, next on the agenda for this thing is going to be front suspension, maybe a tune-up. But I think I'm going to end this here series. It's going to be a long video, but I'll do the suspension in a separate one. So thanks for watching. Have a good one.